Let's turn to our last topic today. In this week's Spectator, Wolfgang Munchau writes about what he calls the most controversial gas pipeline in the world. It certainly is. It's called Nord Stream 2 and would directly supply natural gas from Russia to Germany. European leaders are furious at the plans, while Biden's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said he's going to do whatever he can to stop its completion. So why is Germany sidling up to Russia? How will it change the EU's relationship with the US? Wolfgang is director of Eurointelligence. Many of you remember when he wrote excellent columns for the Financial Times. He joins us now. Wolfgang, thanks for being on Spectator TV. Just give us, before we come to the issues that are making the headlines at the moment, just give us a bit of background to how Nord Stream 2 came into effect.
Well, it all happened with Angela Merkel's decision to cut off the nuclear power industry in 2011. She decided to accelerate the phase out, and that made Germany more dependent on gas and oil for its energy consumption. And Germany is a country with a lot of manufacturing industry, so it has a very large demand for energy compared to most countries of its size. And the only country that was able to, or the only source of energy that was readily available was gas from Russia. And the idea of Nord Stream 2 is a pipeline that goes from the Russian end of the Baltic Sea through Swedish, Danish waters into Germany, has been to supply gas directly from Russia to Germany, bypassing Ukraine, critically enough. And that has been one of the reasons why the US administration has been so critical of this project. And of course, because it makes Germany even more dependent on Russian gas than it already is. And the problem right now is that Germany actually is already dependent on Russian gas, because what happens if Germany were to yield to US demands and stop the pipeline, for example, in protest against the arrest of Navalny, then the Russians have threatened to cut off Germany from its existing supplies, and that could conceivably produce an acute energy crisis right now. So this is a real sort of almost life and death issue for the German government, and they are going to some extreme measures to make sure that this Russian gas is flowing and that this pipeline is, the construction of the pipeline is completed.
The Polish response to the problem of gas supplies was to build a number of new LNG harbors, places where LNG can be offloaded. A lot of it coming from the United States, which is now a major gas exporter. Was that never considered an option for Germany?
Yes, the Germans have considered the option. They have even offered to build a terminal. What has emerged this week is that the German finance minister has actually offered to spend a billion euros on constructing an LNG terminal. The problem is that the existing LNG terminals in Europe are not fully utilized in any case. And from an American point of view, the issue is that, it's the dependence on Russian gas. Once this pipeline is flowing, there won't be much demand for LNG. LNG is a more complicated technology. The stuff has to be, it's liquid. It has to be, turned into gas.
It's more expensive to move around.
Yes, so the issue is not, the Germans think it's commercial. The Germans think the Americans just want to sell their LNG to them instead of, this is not a fair characterization of the American position. For the American, this is a strategic thing as well, because Germany is dependent, it's part of NATO, but it makes itself dependent on Russia. So this is the American position. It's not only the Republican administration's position, it was the position of the Trump administration, but it is a bipartisan majority in Congress that has passed a law in 2019 to stop, to impose sanctions on companies involved in this project. And the Republicans and the Biden administration seems intent, from what we know so far, to follow this law and use this law.
So just to categorize the geopolitical concern about this pipeline, at base, is it a concern that Germany will be, for a chunk of its energy needs, it will be dependent on Russia, and that will make it more cozy with Russia. It would be less likely to stand up to Russia at times when NATO and the West and Germany's allies need to stand up to Russia. Is that the fundamental concern?
That is indeed the fundamental concern. And what I would add to this is that this situation has already arisen. I do not think Germany is at this moment willing already to stand up to Russia, because it is dependent on Russia already. And this pipeline will make it more dependent. And there are also political links between the Social Democratic Party in Germany and Russia. We remember that Gerhard Schroeder, the former chancellor, is the supervisory board chairman of the Nord Stream 2 project. He's a personal friend of Putin. He once called Putin a first-rate Democrat. So he is, the social democratic leadership, including the president of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, is also very close to Russia, and this week said that the pipeline was something that Germany owed to Russia because of the Second World War. The social democrat-run state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, this is the state in the northeastern part of Germany, has accepted money from the Nord Stream 2 company to build a foundation which serves as a way to circumvent US sanctions, because US sanctions are not directed against state and government-owned entities. So they are playing hardball, to put this mildly.
I've been reading your excellent article in this week's Spectator, Wolfgang. It does seem that there's a Russian lobby at the heart of the German political elite. Is that unfair to say that? And if it's not unfair, why is there this Russian lobby?
The Russian lobby has a long tradition. There is a committee called the East Committee of the German economy. And that committee is very powerful. I compare it to the National Rifle Association in the United States in terms of its influence in the German in German business. It has
interesting comparison.
It includes a lot of companies, especially the people who've been exporting to Russia. Now they have complained bitterly about the sanctions that Germany, Merkel, to her credit, she was instrumental in organizing these European sanctions against Russia, but she also made sure that these sanctions wouldn't would not extend to energy. So these sanctions are relatively, wouldn't say symbolic, but they are not as big as they could be or should be. And these people are now, are putting, there's a massive lobby, an industrial lobby that, that's influential in the SPD, parts of the CDU, the Christian Democrat, Angela Merkel's party, the CSU. So these are the parties that are most likely to be, having these links to Russia. The party that is the least likely, or that is most opposed to Nord Stream, actually the only party that is opposed to Nord Stream, are the Greens. And we are in this extraordinary position that the US position and the position of the Green Party in Germany are completely aligned. That hasn't happened before.
Strange bedfellows indeed. The role of Gerhard Schroeder, former social democratic chancellor of Germany, his role, looking from the outside, just seems extraordinary. I mean, Alex Salmond, former First Minister of Scotland, he was beyond the pale because he presents a program on what we used to call Russia Today. That's all. And he's no longer an active politician. But Gerhard Schroeder's relationship with Mr. Putin and the Kremlin, I find it hard to think that any British public figure could survive what Gerhard Schroeder has done.
Well, the thing is, Gerhard Schroeder, survival is no longer a matter for German politics or for Germany. The German public is reacting similarly to that. This is not accepted. This is not an accepted standard. There is no law against this. The government has since sharpened the procedures against politicians leaving government and getting into the employment of someone. But in general, there is this is assumed to be his choice, One would assume that the United States would also not be able to stop Mr. Trump from acting the way he will act or wants to act after his presidency. there are certain, I think, we discover.
He hasn't described Putin's Russia as a well-functioning democracy, but I understand Mr. Schroeder's come quite close to that.
He has. He has. I mean, he's a personal friend of Putin. Putin came to his birthday, and they've been close on a personal level. But even Merkel, who is not close to Putin, when they meet, they speak Russian. It's there is a deep understanding in German, certainly in the German society or in the sort of political society of Russia. Russia is a country that Germans understand quite well. If you look at EU countries, the understanding of Russia is fairly high in Germany relative to that of other countries, and there is a link. I mean, I always think the Germans look at Russia the way the Dutch look at Germany. It's sort of the smaller country looking at the bigger country in a mixture of fear and admiration. And that's the relationship that the two countries have had historically.
The other geopolitical significance that comes out of your article, Wolfgang, is that we all assume that with the departure of Trump, and with a more traditional American president back in the White House, a pro-NATO transatlantic president, that would mark a reset of European-American relations. There would still be arguments, there always are. There were arguments under Clinton, arguments going back to Eisenhower, under Reagan, but that it would be reset in a more normal way. It is possible, is it not, that the row over this pipeline is going to be a huge spanner in the works of that?
I would think so. The Biden administration will change the tone, and it's already changed the tone towards Germany. But Merkel herself has concluded that and I think rightly concluded that Trumpism wasn't defeated in the last election. Trump was defeated. There was a clear election result, but it was a narrow election result. Trump got some 70 million plus votes. Trumpism is still there. It might return. So Germany has concluded that, and along with France, that they needed to be, autonomous in terms of its foreign policy. This is not, a description of the status today, because they are not autonomous, but it's certainly a long-term policy goal. To become less dependent on the United States. But they are still dependent on the United States. So we are in this sort of position where these sort of ambitions and the reality are apart.
Final question for you, Wolfgang. Despite the Biden administration's dislike of this pipeline, and the British don't like it either. I think there's quite a few European allies are not at all keen on it. The EU, as I understand it, isn't that keen on it either. But despite all that, is it too late to stop now? Is the pipeline going to happen, almost close to a done deal? The Germans were quite optimistic in December that they could get this done. There was this Russian pipelaying vessel which was dispatched to complete the remaining 5%. But the problem that has arisen is that companies in charge of safety certification, have refused to actually do the job because they are subject to US sanctions. And as of now, there is no plan B for that. There is no company available willing to do this. Now they might come up with something, so it is a bit of a race against the time. The idea is to complete the remaining 5%. And get the stuff switched on before the Americans do anything. But so far, this isn't happening. And the interesting, when I speak to both sides, is both sides are absolutely convinced that their position will ultimately prevail. The Americans are absolutely convinced that they will stop it. And in Germany, virtually everybody is telling you that gas will flow in the end. So, somebody will in the end lose out. And at the moment, I think that, my hunch is that it will flow at reduced rate. That will be the compromise at some point, but this won't be easy to work. So there may be some
some kind of compensation payment that Germany pays to Russia or something like that. There is a compromise possible because the amount of gas you send through a pipeline is, one can regulate it. So that would probably be, that is a possible compromise.
Okay, well, the story's not over yet, Wolfgang. We'll come back to you as it develops. But for the moment, Wolfgang Munchau, Director of Eurointelligence. Thank you for your column in The Spectator this week, and thank you for appearing on Spectator TV.